Welcome everyone to the second of a series with Emma Pleasure. I'm really excited. The last one, I will put the link up, was mind-blowing. I was on a high for quite some time, Emma, so thank you for that. And we're going to be talking again about intimacy and pleasure. Last time was about for us as an individual, but this time we're going to talk about it as a couple, because it's quite different when you've got two people involved in this. Emma is a sexologist and a yoga and tantra teacher, and we're going to bring in tantra, the traditional way of what it's meant to be in our lives, rather than the way the Western world has made it all about. And I'll hand over to you, Emma.
All about sex.
That's exactly right. Clearly, I'm not quite there yet.
Thank you. That's a lovely intro and a lovely reminder, and a beautiful segue into all the different things that this conversation is no doubt going to touch on. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important, and also we're going to touch on trauma, because that's basically where I'm coming from, but it doesn't mean it's all about trauma, but most of us bring some wounding into a relationship, don't we?
Absolutely.
And the important thing is, and I think this is why I really wanted to bring you back again and talk about it as a couple, because I know I wasn't taught how to talk about it. I wasn't taught as a woman in those days how to even express desires or needs or pleasure, let alone in the act of. I'm still of that era where you don't quite say it yet, but I'll get there. Versus just even the lead up to it, the intimacy of it and the pleasure.
Yes. Yeah. And even in that, there is so many topics and places we could go to.
Yeah.
And the thing that brings them all together is conditioning.
Yes.
The conditioning that we've experienced and the different areas that conditioning impacts our lives. And that is, do I have needs? Don't even know, because I had to, put myself aside to be safe in the relationship with this person. And our sex ed has been pretty woeful, generally speaking, across the board, no matter what age we are. And if that's not the case for you, you are definitely one of the lucky ones.
Yes.
And so that does not set us up to have a great understanding of how to ask for what we need and what sex might look like in a healthy, nourishing relationship. And so when we have that as the baseline of our sex ed, we fill in those gaps from media, from what we read in books, what we see on TV, what we read in movies, and if you partake, what you see in adult media. And all of those present a skewed reality of what intimacy and relating is. And I find myself increasingly frustrated when I'm engaging in media and books about how non-realistic this is, and how there's just always this particular push-pull dynamic that is depicted, or things are kind of glorified in a particular way to make them really interesting for the screen. And in the nuance of that, we lose what would be genuine relating and genuine build-up and the diversity of experiences.
Thank you. And I was thinking the word about conditioning, and then you're talking about education. It was literally biological. This happens, this is a male anatomy, female anatomy, this happens, birds, bees, and if you're lucky, you got a bit more than that. And that was really it. So there was no, as you said, nuance for each person's desires, each person's personalities, each person, whether they want to be more out there with it or not. Because you feel, first of all, you feel guilty anyhow. There's a lot of shame around that you actually want to have a vibrant life in the bedroom. And, particularly as a woman, not so sure about men. So you can, so therefore you don't. Plus you don't, and I know for me, coming from a traumatic household and my parents, not that you, first of all, you never want to believe your parents do the act anyhow. We were immaculate conception, that sort of thing. But because my mum and dad were always fighting, and there was always fear, there was never even any healthy sort of hugs or just holding each other's hands or just that lovely kissing of each other, you know, or anything like that, even if it's just a little
Yes.
peck on the cheek. So you don't even get that. So you don't know that that's actually, it's lovely.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so this is priming us for what a relationship looks like and what is considered to be inherently normal in terms of how we relate with people. So if the normal that we grow up with does not include affection, does not include communication about sex, does not include like displays of intimacy, knowing that when I talk about intimacy, I do not specifically mean sexual intimacy, but I mean intimacy of heart to heart, soul to soul, like a deep connection with another human being or with ourselves. And that can be sexual, but sex can also be completely devoid of intimacy, really. So just to make that distinction. And we can end up feeling like we're moving through cycles of relationships that don't have these things, even though we want them. And when we have them, they can feel so strange. We can actually fight against that.
Okay. Okay. And again, it's these subtle nuances, isn't it? It's just subtle, subtle thing. And if we're not taught to talk about it openly, or there's a shame and embarrassment to even to go to someone like yourself, you know, I'm just even wondering with YouTube here, because I think I can post this because, you know, we've got the words in there, you know, that's how, what's the word? Oh, I've just forgotten what word to use, how we can't even say those words nowadays without it being
Yes.
taken into perhaps being more than it actually is. We're just having a normal conversation here.
Yeah.
That, you know, it could be rejected or people could reject it. How dare you use that word?
Yes. Yep. That is definitely a challenge in this line of work. And even, you know, if people say, what do you do? And I say I'm a sexologist, most people hear that as psychologist. And the next common response is that even a thing? So it's definitely a thing. And you know, it's just what you're saying is just so big. Like I can't necessarily openly talk about, even respectfully, even though when you read community guidelines, you're allowed to talk about it from the sake of education. I still need to be really careful about how I broach this topic and the various words and using correct anatomical terms. And the more that that is hidden within society, the more shame we can feel. And when we can use terms openly, it actually creates less shame for us. It becomes normal. It becomes easier to educate our children. It becomes easier to go to the doctor and say, hey, I've noticed this is going on, right? Or I'm here for my pap smear. And so there's a whole lot of things that open up for us when we just even get comfortable with saying the words and the proper anatomical names, in addition to there being extra safety that comes along with using correct anatomical names, especially for children.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, you know, again, keeps dropping. And when I think back when I first got my menstruation, my periods, I was at a friend's place, just to make it even a little bit more exciting. We're living in Switzerland. And in those days, girls were a bit older, starting periods and, you know, changing shape. Well, I wasn't. There was a few foreigners, about 3 of us, and we all were a lot younger than everyone else, just to make it even a bit more exciting. But I can remember not wanting to know, not being told, having no idea what had happened, you know, and then going home embarrassed, then trying to work out how to use a tampon, you know, all these things, like you said, just make the whole experience dirty, shameful. And then being brought up a Catholic, you know, women are not allowed up at the altar, you know, having your period was this, and this, and we couldn't go to the sports with boys, you know. So there's shaming of the whole body in addition to the sexuality and the sensuality of our bodies.
Yes, absolutely. And in the context of this conversation where we bring that into what does that mean for our relating with other people, it means that we carry that body shame And we carry that lack of permission to feel full and whole in our bodies into our interactions with other, whether that be sexual or non-sexual, whether they be heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul intimacy or not.
Yes. Yes, and I think that coming back to that heart-to-heart intimacy and pleasure is, we don't even know how to have a lovely hug. You know, even just female to female, male to male, and particularly nowadays, because it's considered, oh, you know, you must like that boy. And I know when I first came back to Australia, so might have changed, this is years ago, I didn't understand the mentality here versus Europe. Europe, we just hugged and kissed each other. That was just part of where. Here, my mother actually said to me, who is Australian, even though she lived abroad, said, oh, don't, because I touch people. You know, she said, oh, don't do that, because they might, this is years ago, might consider that you are coming on to them. So I was taken aback. It never occurred to me that that was possibly considered consent or potential consent to say, I am interested in you.
Yes. And there's a lot of blurring of the lines in that form. And, you know, I laughed when you said it's not allowed to hug, when we're not allowed to hug. And there was a part of me that kind of went, oh, that's not okay to laugh at that. But it also is ludicrous that something that we really need for our nervous systems is something that can be seen as so taboo and can be misconstrued so much. And I think another facet of this is also when we don't have this good foundation for intimacy, relating, understanding ourselves as sensual and sexual beings, those messages can be more easily mixed up. And really, I think some of that comes down to a distinction that is, I like how I feel when I'm around you, and not understanding that that is the experience that we're having. And so misplacing that, if that person is somebody that fits, you know, the gender sex equation of what we might be attracted to, we might misplace this feeling of I like who I am and I'm enjoying myself with you as sexual attraction towards another person. And I think we could do a much better job of unpacking the things that come before that, so that we can have a different experience of what it is that we are experiencing in ourselves, and hold that without actually making that about other people.
I like that. So it's like I said, because the word that came to my mind when I think back when I was younger living in Europe, flirtation. We knew the art of flirtation.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Whereas I came here and there was no art of flirtation. There was this divide.
Yes.
And as you said, it went straight to the act of. Well, you know, that's, I mean, it's a generalization. I'm aware of that. But I think, again, it's like, how do we as an individual, number one, male or female, have the courage to go and seek help to find out what we do like? And then the next step was, how do we then bring it together, particularly in a newest relationship, or even one you've been in a while? So so talk to us about what if one person's willing to, the other one isn't?
Yeah, that's really tricky, because really above everything, we have consent as an individual person. So if someone is a no, they're a no. Full stop, end of story when it comes to anything that happens to their body. And so you have to work with that no first. And then there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. And sometimes we don't know how to have that conversation, or we don't know how to work with what the block is. We might need a facilitated conversation. And so if that person is a no to the facilitated conversation, I think that's where it becomes the most tricky, because you don't have the support to help them move through what it is that makes them feel that no. If there is the opportunity for support, or, you know, going a little bit through what it is that needs to be worked around, then that's the avenue. Is, okay, I can be responsible for myself, and, you know, from my arousal needs, if we're talking sexual intimacy, and there can be conversations and an opening up of what sex means, so that sex is not just a thing that goes into another thing, but that sex is something that is much broader and can encompass basically anything between kissing and holding hands and intercourse. And so that is where I would recommend that people kind of play in the space of, well, we can just enjoy kissing, if that's okay for that person, or we can just enjoy touching. And at a recent Tantra workshop that I did, I had somebody come and speak to me afterwards who said they had experienced a lot of sexual trauma through a lot of their life, and they don't normally feel okay with any kind of touch from other people at all. Yes. And within the context of it wasn't a workshop, but the practices that we were doing, there was a container of safety, there was a container of consent, there was a container of presence that was available, that person felt like they could drop into, and they received touch that was between their fingertips and the elbow, and they enjoyed that touch and felt completely safe in that touch. And so those hallmarks again are safety, consent. Consent in this case was, there was a parameter of, we're touching this part of this person's body. Yes. Make sure they're okay with that first, because it was a new partner each practice. And then within that, we had the bigger container where we'd been set up for other things before we even got to touching.
Well, I've just gone goose, and what an incredible experience for that woman. I could just feel it as you described it, because it's that wonderment, again, to me, that comes back to that wonderment. Oh my God, is this what I've been missing out on? Just that beautiful, as you said, touch, because that's all it needs. And even I've only recently learned to touch myself. Yes. From a point of view of just hugging and feeling safe and grounded, because again, you're not meant to do that. Oh my gosh, that's that selfish or self, I just think back on my grandma, my mum's era, and just in particular because they're British, even though Australian, but it was everything was perfunctory. And even when mum was having, I think it was me. Anyhow, she'd had an older son. But why I'm saying that to you is that when Catholic, because Dad was Catholic, you had to have it in the Catholic hospital. Well, the nuns weren't believing her that she was already, that she was in contraction. She said, I know, because I've already had a baby. But because they'd never had anything like that, they're not allowed to. They're meant to remain virginal. Again, it's even there where not understanding the body, because they felt at 3 a.m. they couldn't get a specialist out. Well, he was always available. Yeah. So again, it affects right down to that my mum didn't even know her own body.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So,
it's just heartbreaking, really. There's no other word for how disempowered we can end up through systems, through conditioning, through, global society or the culture that we live in, and what it teaches us to do or not to do with our bodies, and how it just becomes so ingrained that we don't even know that we're doing it.
Yes.
And the distrust that then happens in our body, and our body can be giving us clear messages, but because we haven't learned to be present to those messages, it can be very easy to just not notice that they're there. And in the process of that, we are unknowingly continually abandoning ourselves.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I'm actually going to add to that as well. You might also choose to ignore them, like you might hear them or feel them and then choose to ignore them as well, because that's that bypassing that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking of when you're talking about it with two people, like when you want to play and explore, I'm wondering if also there comes in not only the shame, but the not getting it right.
Yeah, definitely. So we call that performance anxiety.
And that can go into any area of your life, can't it? So,
absolutely,
that makes sense.
Absolutely. So, anytime you're worried about getting it right, or, whether you're big enough, beautiful enough, hard enough, whether you last long enough, whether you're going to orgasm this time or not, all of these things are what we in the profession will globally refer to as a type of performance anxiety. What having a label like that does is not to put anything into a box, but simply to have a way of understanding the sorts of process that's going on underneath, which is something about me or the way I'm doing this is not enough. If we had not had much experience, we're going to feel that more naturally. Think about, learning to drive. We don't know what we're doing, and we don't expect somebody to walk into the kitchen and make us a 7-course degustation. We may have talked about that last time, right? So there is room for us to develop our knowledge and our expertise, and that comes with practice. And as we practice, we feel more confident. And there's also another layer to this where the trauma that we have, which is, perhaps putting other people's needs first, can also be a layer in this and be difficult to navigate, because when we're in that situation, we're perhaps what's often called a people pleaser. And as a people pleaser, it can be really hard to ask for feedback. So when we're learning to relate sexually, feedback is great. Is this nice? Do you like this? Is this okay? And just those gentle words are asking them to give you feedback as to whether what you're providing, what you're offering, is something that's working for them. And on the flip side, it's giving the other person an invitation to be able to say, actually, I would like something different, whether that just be harder, softer, higher. Actually, I'm not quite there yet. Could we move to my belly instead? It's really nice when you kiss my neck. And again, when I think about my Tantra workshops, I have a lot of people who come to me afterwards and say, I found it really difficult, even when I specifically open a place within a practice for them to say, not quite. This is not quite what I want. There are many, many people, even with specific permission that is given, who find it difficult to ask for something to be different, even though that thought is there. And so really, I think this is the crux of, and we really talked about it last conversation that we had, how do I allow that voice, that thought, that wanting, that knowing to have a voice?
Yeah. Oh my God, there's just so much in there. A couple of things that came through was when someone asks you, like you said, gentle, those gentle words, is this right? I mean, how powerful for someone who's been trauma to be seen, witnessed, heard, considered.
Yes.
Was probably when you first go, like, hang on, did this really happen?
Yes.
Is this real? And then allowing it to trust and allowing it to drop into trust that yes, it is happening.
Yes.
And it's okay to happen. And then that opens up to vulnerability. And it's how do you remain in that vulnerability, which is beautiful. And then the other one, I think you just said, hard to ask for something that is different. And I was sort of going to add to what is being already offered. So again, it's like, actually, no, I don't want that. And we talked about it last time, pleasure, that ice cream, I'd like this one, or I don't want that juicy peach, I'd like this. Even that we can find hard because we're not being taught to say it's actually okay to say, no, I would like that instead. And particularly, I think if we feel we're putting someone out.
Yes, absolutely. And if we're worried that there's going to be some repercussion, if that person will be upset, and, if we have programming that basically says that everything is our fault, that we are to blame when someone else is upset, that becomes even more difficult to speak up.
Yes. And the other thing I was thinking, coming back to like people pleaser, we're there to protect the other person because you don't want to hurt them or make them go into shame or, they were offering something really lovely, but I didn't like it, so I don't want them to feel upset, hurt, disappointed. Yes. So again, we push ourselves aside.
Yes. Yeah. And what is also true in this, and, just giving people something to be able to move into what it is like to be on the other side, is people like receiving the feedback in sexual intimacy that it's nice.
Yes.
And there are ways to say, I'm not enjoying this, that are not hurtful. And that could simply be the sorts of things that I suggested before: softer, higher, slower, harder. You know, it's a simple, it would turn me on if, could we try? And so these things can come through without them having a sting that other things like I don't like that might have. And sometimes I don't like that is absolutely appropriate, or no, or I'm not ready yet. Could we try this?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think so. And I think, again, it's like anything, practice.
Yes.
And it might be, as you said, so again, ways to do it. So I'd like you to, perhaps go down this track. Ways to do it would be talk about it first, or seek support first, and then to say, I don't know, this is a nice thing. Let's go and play, like practice play. So something, make it into something like that. So what do you sort of suggest to, well, I suppose people, couples, because that's what we're talking about today?
Yep, absolutely. So I would say, first of all, you're looking at intimacy within your relationship, not just sexual intimacy. So if you've got a solid foundation of intimacy, which is turning towards, so your partner has come to you about something and you respond to that positively. Hey, did you see that bird outside? And you might go, what bird? I'm busy. This is turning away. But instead, if you go, oh no, I didn't, is it still there? And you engage with that, that's turning towards. So we know that that builds a strong foundation. Cuddling, kissing just for the sake of kissing, having moments of pause and connection, making time for each other. If love languages work for you, that's an idea to, show your partner appreciation in the way that they receive appreciation.
Yes.
And from that, you're building a solid, stable, trusting relationship. And communication is also really key in this: how we communicate, how we mirror, how we reflect what it is that we're hearing, how we meet in the middle with our communication. So when we say, have you got the time, we are constantly interpreting that phrase as, this person would like to know the time from me. That's not actually the question that's been asked. But this is what we need to do when we're communicating with people. What is the intended message? How do I respond to the intended message? So just getting a little bit closer. When we have this, it's easier for sexual intimacy to flow, because we've been making time for each other, because we have this foundation of trust, intimacy, respect, because there is a foundation of safe communication. It makes it easier to take those skills and that mode and that knowing and way of being into sexual intimacy. And so in sexual intimacy, you might just start slow. And there's this thing that happens where, we tend to get to the stage where we have intercourse, and then our sexual relations become about intercourse, forgetting that it doesn't have to be, and forgetting that it's totally okay and even ridiculously pleasurable to have interactions that don't have orgasms in them. And we can enjoy just slow touch presence, a synchronized breath. One of the simplest exercises is just the person who's touching uses their hand to touch the other person, and the person who's touching focuses on the feelings on their fingertips. So I hold my hand up. So the toucher will focus on the feeling in their fingertips, and the receiver is focusing on the sensation.
Oh, and you can even do it. Oh my gosh.
Can. Yeah. And explore the different touch. So you might like to do a light scratch. You might like to use the backs of your nails. If trauma is involved, sometimes a firm squeeze is really nice sensory information. And if you're doing that to yourself and it feels really nourishing, it can sometimes feel really good to say, this is my body. This is my arm. This is my body. If you're sharing that with another person, asking them, does the light touch feel good? Does the firm touch feel good? Noticing what they respond to.
Yes. And also gives them responsibility to say, actually, yes, I like this or not. So it's a two-way thing, isn't it?
Yes.
God, I love that. That is just, oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
And so so simple, yet it's so hard to do when you've been traumatized or something has happened in your life where, you know, and also when you haven't, I've been learning a bit more about attachment theories, you know, and when you haven't had the correct attachment to particularly your mum, your mother, how that then also, you know, doesn't support, well, they take that into life. And I think the other thing you said, two things that came up was that kissing doesn't always have to lead to the act of, because that's, again, because you're kissing, it needs to. No, why? Exactly right. Why not just enjoy it for that? And secondly, sometimes there might be relief there where, today it's just purely doing this. Because I think there's also an element, doesn't it? I mean, now coming back to performance anxieties, I have to constantly be performing. What if I'm too tired or it's just not happening at the moment? And, you know, but I would still like intimacy and pleasure.
Yes, yeah. And this is also a sticking point for people who are in a relationship where one person has really low libido and one person has really high libido, and kissing, it can be a signal, particularly for the higher libido person, that it's on. And so sometimes we actually need to say, I would like to share a kiss with you. I would just like to share a kiss with you. Or I would just like for us to cuddle. And to have the boundary in place that is about the physical intimacy not becoming more sexual than this. And that can fuel the fire, the safety, the respect of the boundaries, help us know that when we say no, that will be respected. Remembering that consent means we can also withdraw our consent at any point in time, regardless of what has come before.
I'd like you to say that again so people can really hear that.
Yes. So consent can be withdrawn. I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, so have I.
Yeah, at any point in time, regardless of what the activity is, who it's with, and what has come before. You can change your mind.
Yes. You can change your mind. I think it might be worth just us, even if, you know, when anyone's watching, just I'm going to say, I can change my mind.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to change my mind. I have permission to change my mind. It's okay to change my mind no matter what's that, because I'm important. So that's, I think, what I'm important, you know. And I think also I was coming back to, I had a thought anyhow. Let's carry on. It was something to do with trauma. And I can't think. You were just saying something so powerful. Oh, that's right. About, I know for me, I had to learn to voice what I wanted because, number one, I wasn't taught to, but number two, sometimes I thought it was obvious what I wanted, like, hello.
Yes.
you should have been able to read my mind. I mean, I make a joke, I laugh now because I look back and go, wow. But again, it's, you think the other person should know. How did you not know that blah, blah, blah? Well, well, if you don't tell me that, how can I know?
Yep.
Or you did this to give me the impression that I had permission or that it was okay or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And that last bit, I mean, this is the nuance of consent that is just, it's a huge topic right now. So what I'd love to just talk about a couple of things here. There is an analogy about tea, that tea as consent, like, would you like a cup of tea? No, I'd like a milkshake. Would you like your tea with milk? Yes, I would. How much milk? Would you like it with sugar? Yes, I would. How much sugar? Here's your tea. Actually, that's too hot. I think I'll wait. Here's your tea. Oh, actually, I've changed my mind. I would like that milkshake after all. Right? This is all okay. And if the other person is annoyed by that, that's actually on them. And that bit's really hard when there's been trauma. If someone responds badly to you changing your mind, that's a real indication about whether they're a safe person for you to be exploring with and for you to be expanding into sexual safety and sexual autonomy with and relational intimacy with. And, you know, it really shows how respectful someone is. And we can be responding, like, it can be confusing because the body can respond to something that the mind is absolutely not into.
Yes, yes.
Right. And so what is happening here is the body recognizes that this thing is sexually relevant. And so it starts to prepare. And so that might mean lubrication, knowing that all sexes produce lubrication and all sexes have erectile tissue. So everyone gets hard, everyone gets wet. So your body might be responding and you're not into it, you maybe don't like it at all. And that is disconcordance, lack of, cohesion between those two experiences can be really confusing and confronting at times, especially if the no is about trauma and the body is responding. Yeah. And so know that that is simply the body having a conditioned response. Like if you practice yoga, you put your yoga mat out in the studio, you get on your yoga mat and your body seems to do this sigh, right? So, or, we go into a restaurant and we weren't hungry, but we are hungry now because the environment means food, right? So it's the body having a conditioned response. If you're a no mentally, you're a no mentally. That's your body saying no. And also, there can be a not yet, a period of time where it takes your body a little while to catch up. So desire, mental desire, can occur after we've begun. Just like sometimes we're procrastinating and we're not motivated, but we start and then we get into it once we've started, right? So that is different to a no. That's different to a no. That's yes, I'm willing. Yes, I'm present. Yes, I'm part of this, and my body will catch up. So it will catch up as you like things and as they feel good, right? So there's that aspect flowing through. I'm going to pause. Looks like just to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you, because there is what I'm hearing is as well is that again you to learn to practice to understand body mind, because if you've been so disconnected, your body's saying one thing. So I suppose it is learning how to bring your body, mind, heart and soul together. Again, practice, again, you need support. Again, it's about understanding, oh, well, my body's saying, because it is conditioned to get aroused, whereas I'm actually not there yet. So again, I think, again, it's how do you learn yourself to connect your body to say, actually, I'm not wanting that, even though my body's saying yes. Or it could be the other way around. Where your body's going, actually, no, but you're going, but yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so understanding those differences. And that's where if we go back to, something that we've already touched on, but just really make it clear, if this is a learning place for you and you're learning to feel safe and comfortable and explore without triggering trauma, taking it really slow, like that touch exercise, just hand to elbows, or, then you might extend it to the shoulder, right? So you keep it really, really contained, and then you have the opportunity to learn within that container. And by keeping things really present, this is where I think Tantra is so great, because it can immediately and automatically move us beyond the mode in which our trauma is triggered, because the presence that we bring to it, the mindfulness, the intention, is actually completely different. The type of touch is therefore not the same. The type of excitement that we feel in our body is therefore not the same. And tantric sex inherently, we might think that means Kama Sutra. I did. Once upon a time, thought that Tantra meant Kama Sutra style sex. It's not a specific position. It's not specific techniques. Inherently, at its core essence, tantric sex is presence. If you are bringing more presence to your sexual interaction, that's tantric sex. And so this can help you move into a different mode that keeps you deeply connected with what is happening. And there's this dance where, we, like in trauma-informed yoga, for example, we don't really talk about the breath, because that can be triggering. And there's this level of body awareness that we do and don't go into. So what Tantra does is it allows all of that to be true, while we can focus on something that also doesn't take us into the same experiences.
That I'm having to, so I'm writing it, just amazing what you're saying. And I think, you know, what came into mind is, again, if anyone wants to go back and look at the first one we talked about last week, because it is about your own individual pleasure. And there we talked more about mindfulness in a different way. Like, you know, I keep talking about the juicy peach, but it's also when you start to learn as an individual what you love apart from touch. So it might feel safer to enjoy, you know, something external out here, to then slowly bring, because then, as you said, you know how the sensations feel, because excitement and fear are related, you know. So your body could go into excitement, but in fact it could be fear. So it's learning the difference between those responses as well, you know. And then you can come and bring it perhaps to touch the body, then, you know. So I mean, it's a slow process. It takes time, doesn't it, you know?
Absolutely.
And you need to, I really do believe you need to make that time for yourself as well as for the other.
Yep.
And then come together as you know, togetherness.
Yes. Yeah. And part of that, I do agree that the last conversation we had, I think, probably pairs with this some sort of little pieces of foundational practices or ideas and ways to develop this knowing. It's not like you can't listen to this conversation on its own and not get value, but I think the two together will make this one a little more practical from a foundational level. The other thing that's come up about relating and, you know, how we, you know, learn to know ourselves and how we come together with another person. You brought up before attachment styles. So attachment styles in intimacy can create this push and pull in relationships, depending on what our attachment styles are. And some books, like if you happen to have read or seen anything in the 50 Shades of Grey series, that depicts very well an anxious attachment style and how sex is used to validate and reinforce that the relationship is okay. So if you're in a relationship where there's fiery arguments and then you have this really powerful make-up sex, that could be part of what's happening. I'm not prescriptively saying that definitely is what's happening for you, because I don't know specifically until I'm in there. But quite often what we see is this need for reinforcement and validation of a relationship after there has been some upset that makes us feel like the relationship is in threat. And so sex can be used for that. And so Chantal, you touched on that really beautifully before, where you were talking about feeling like we can feel heightened after even just a conversation that feels like an argument to us. And that can feel like there's extra repercussions that are going to come. And so that's that type of mode of, well, hang on, I'm reading into this person's behavior, or the hypervigilance in me thinks there's something wrong with it when there's not. And so understanding the difference in this, and I see this energetically as being like two Pac-Mans. And the Pac-Man has its mouth that's missing, and it's trying to bite the other Pac-Man so it can fill the mouth part and make itself a full circle. And the other Pac-Man is also trying to bite. And so we can look at codependent literature to kind of understand that dynamic a little bit more. And if we don't have those tendencies, we are two whole circles that kind of come together and we mesh and mold, but we stay as two whole complete circles, not trying to steal each other's energy.
Oh, I love that. And the words that come to mind, I was taught dependent, independent, interdependent.
Yes.
Or like Khalil Gibran says, in a marriage, you walk together, but, you know, and you know, walk alongside each other, you know, it's just that lovely, as you said, you're not this, but you're also not this. There's this lovely, you know, in and out, and that safety and trust. I agree. So, oh my goodness, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with all of this, Emma. Fantastic.
It is a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. It is a lot. Now, this is just, as you said, touching on it. And I think, like you said before, what we're doing is, with these conversations, for those of you who are listening, do leave comments. If you get triggered, reach out. I'm putting Emma's information below. It is a big, big subject, and sometimes you wonder, where do I start? You know, so it's just starting somewhere. And it might be just saying to yourself, I want that hot cup of tea. It could be just simple as that.
Yeah.
And just saying why. Again, we talked about the other, that mindfulness of enjoying. That could be just that it.
Yeah.
And when you have the courage, reach out to someone like Emma, who, you know, can start the conversation with you.
Yep,
and do you do it with
absolutely.
couples as well, or just individuals? Yeah, so
couples
there you go.
well.
So, oh my goodness, thank you, Emma. What would you like to, like we did last time, end this with?
I think it's probably the same message, is just make it doable.
Make it doable, and I like that.
Yeah, and that flows just beautifully on from what you said as well, is, you know, if we, especially if we're feeling a bit overwhelmed, there's been a lot of information, we're talking about some heavy things when we're talking about trauma, but we're also talking about, as we said at the beginning, subjects and topics that we really don't get taught about. Yeah. And so I would say, if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, do something that's regulating. That might be hugging yourself for 20 seconds, marching on the spot, taking a gargling cold water can help as well. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do right now if you're feeling a little bit, oh, I feel a bit off kilter after listening to all this, it's too much. And then beyond that, as Chantal said, pick one thing and start there. Just whatever stands out the most to you from this conversation, and start there. And if you only do one thing, for the whole of the next year, that's okay. It's a 1 or 2% change. And those little increments add up over time.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Emma. And I think, again, make it doable. Absolutely. And make it yours, something you love, whatever that might be. Yeah. Thank you, Emma. As always, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. As I said to everyone, I'll be popping your details in the notes or description. And please, 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 no shame. Have the courage to reach out if you want to, and just make it doable, as Emma said. Thank you, and thank you again, Emma. Appreciate it.